Thanks everybody for joining. My name is Dypiangco. I'm the CEO of Metaverse Marcom. Metaverse Marcom is a strategy and consulting agency that's focused on helping brands enter Roblox. We've developed really strong expertise in entertainment, especially, and have a special focus on sports. We've developed some really strong insights on what have been the best practices for brands across building games, integrating into games, and launching UGC virtual items. If you're interested in checking out more about us, you can visit our website, metaversemarcom.io, where we have a free weekly newsletter you can sign up for. All right, so that's a little bit about me. Why don't I go ahead and pass it over to Tian and then Ridley and Max to just say a little bit about where you work, and what you do there.
Sure. Hey guys and gals, I'm Tian. I'm head of sports partnerships at Roblox. I'm based in New York. My job is really fun. So fortunate to be in this position. I'm responsible for building a sports business on Roblox. But the funnest part that I do is working with people in the sports industry, everyone from rights holders, leagues to clubs, all the way down to athletes, and really helping them understand and be successful on Roblox. Previously I came from Unity. I spent almost 5 years there, most recently in their sports organization. So my background is gaming, tech, and more recently sports.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining, and thanks, Steve, for putting this together. I think it's going to be a great session. There's a ton of stuff to go through over the next 20 or 30 minutes or so. So we'll keep it pretty short and sharp. I'm Ridley Plummer. I lead all things Metaverse, Web3, cryptocurrency, and NFTs at Tennis Australia and the Australian Open. We've had a really interesting 18 months in that journey, which has been a really quick 18 months, and has now sort of led into Roblox and AO Adventure. And I think the success that's come on the back of that is largely thanks to the likes of Max and Tian in the room here today, who have helped out in so many ways. So look forward to deep diving a little bit further.
Great. All right, thanks, Ridley. Over to you, Max.
Cool. Hi, guys and girls. Lovely to meet you. I'm Max. So I'm managing director of Doppelgänger. We're in London, so it's nearly midnight in London. So if I fall asleep halfway through, you'll have to excuse me. But Doppelgänger is a strategic consultancy creative studio helping brands navigate the wonderful world of gaming and the metaverse. So we work with the likes of, in sport, Wimbledon and the Premier League, helping them figure out their strategy up front, and then holding their hand through activation, and then at the back end, helping them to market what their activations are and measuring effectiveness as well. So we wrap around everything other than doing the build itself. We're part of the gang group. So the gang are the people who build the things, and they, from a sports perspective, have worked on a number of sports activations, including, of course, AO Adventure, but also FIFA World, Wimble World, McLaren F1, and most recently this month, actually, NHL Blast, which is super fun to see how that's going. It's about three and a half weeks in. So yeah, that's us.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much, everybody, for those intros. Excited to dive in deeper and explore all that. But before we sort of jump into the conversation, I'm going to close the poll that we have here online and just review really quickly some of the results. So 76% of the respondents, of the people here, are from North America, 8% from South America, 11% from Europe, and then 5% from Australia. And then I'm actually here, let me hit share results. Okay.
They're all here to see Ridley.
So that's sort of where you're located. How familiar are you with Roblox? So 43% beginner, 38% intermediate, and 19% advanced. So a pretty broad cross section there. Do you have your own Roblox user account? 73% said yes. So a lot of people have been in Roblox, tried it out, or maybe they've sort of played with their kids like I have. What industry are you in? So 30% sports, 8% entertainment, 22% advertising, 8% video games, 30% tech, 3% other. And then which best describes what you do, 41% in marketing, 32% BD sales, 8% content, 8% engineering, 5% ops, 5% other. All right. So that gives us a good kind of overview of the audience. Thanks to all of you for sharing that. Just want to call out also, there is a Q&A button that's on your screen. And so as we go along, feel free to drop in questions into the Q&A window. I'll be monitoring those. Also, people who are in attendance can actually upvote the questions that they want to see answered. So we'll save some time at the very end to open it up to questions, and we'll be looking at those results for inspiration for what we'll draw from. All right. So as we get started, let me really turn this over and have my first question for Ridley. And so I want to spend some special time kind of focused on the Australian Open, the AO Adventure experience on Roblox that you can speak to directly, and then Max and Tian can both speak to from their perspectives. And so for you though, Ridley, why did the Australian Open decide to enter Roblox? What was the motivation there?
Accessibility is a big thing for the AO, and I guess when we first created our sort of metaverse strategy, the overarching objective was to make the AO the world's most accessible sports and entertainment event. And accessibility can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, whether it's affordable ticket prices, free-to-air broadcast, or being able to bring your kids on site and have a family-friendly day. So when we came up with that objective, the opportunity for us to give as many people accessibility to the sport and the event as possible, it absolutely made sense that Roblox was one of those avenues that we went down. Because it was a younger demographic that was using that platform as well, it really made sense for us to tap into that global junior demographic. In Australia, we resonate with a young demographic really well. It's school holidays in January when the AO is on. And you also pretty much get a racket put in your hand when you're 8, 9, 10 years old at school. So kids around Australia are very familiar with the brand, but kids around the world are not. They're very familiar with tennis, but they're not necessarily familiar with the AO. So for us, the opportunity to engage with a younger demographic globally was really important for us, that when they then either influence their parents on where they might travel in the world, what TV station they might be watching, what sporting events they might be watching at home, or when they're old enough to decide where they're traveling in the world, we want the AO to be on the bucket list alongside Super Bowl, alongside NBA, alongside the FA Cup final, alongside the Monaco Grand Prix, whatever that happens to be. We want the AO familiar enough with that audience that they may choose to get on a plane one day, come to Melbourne and experience it firsthand. And I think replicating as much of that fun social experience that the AO is all about, the happy slam, as a lot of people know it, that was really important as well, that it wasn't just getting in and playing tennis. I think we all believe that the AO could exist without tennis even being played at the tournament, because we know that people come for 6, 7, 8, 9 hours and barely even see a ball hit at times. It's all about the social experience, the come with your friends and family, come with your kids, bring them to the ballpark, presented by Emirates, of course, which was exactly what we did in Roblox as well. Come for the music, come for the food, come for the social aspect. So that was really important for us.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think when you've mentioned in the past, like accessibility, it's like a surprising answer. It's not the sort of thing that I would expect. I think a lot of what you're talking about in terms of, reaching a young audience and global reach, and then even like the social aspect and sort of translating, that sort of in real life experience into these virtual spaces. I think that's very powerful. But accessibility, like, it's so interesting how, that lens through which you're looking at it. Over to you, Tian. I mean, you're working with, a variety of different sports brands. And so what are some of the sort of motivations that you hear from these entities?
Anything, it really varies, but it all completely makes sense in the world of sports. Number one is just attracting and expanding your fan base. Two is making sure that you're engaging them in new ways that you can't currently in other platforms, and Roblox definitely has a unique value prop right there. And the last is, of course, monetization, which is, or at least a path towards monetization. So generally it falls between one of these three categories with regards to their motivation. You know, accessibility is something that I really admire because, you know, Roblox as a platform, it's all about just, you know, you can be whoever you want to be and you have access to our platform, whether it's on mobile or desktop or console. And that's exactly what Roblox aims to be, right? We want to be an all ages platform, truly global. Anyone can access it and participate in any fashion that they want to. So, you know, for AO to come onto the platform with that level of, I guess, objective was very much aligned with what we wanted to do as a platform.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's super awesome to hear. And I mean, I think about Roblox's reach and the fact that you can play it on all sorts of devices, you know, all over the world really speaks to, you know, that accessibility. So in terms of, you know, those are sort of the motivations. I'll throw it over to you, Ridley, and then to Max to piggyback on this. You know, before you decided, you know, before you launched, I guess, how did you think about measuring success? How did you think about what success would look like, you know, kind of going into this new space for your, you know, for your organization? And then after that, we'll throw it to Max and sort of like how you helped frame that up and evaluated that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's a few different angles to this as far as how we measure success. And I think overarching, what we need to remember in this instance is the AO really only lasts for 2 weeks in January, but AO Adventure on Roblox lasts for 52 weeks of the year. So for us, success was not necessarily about getting the biggest numbers and having millions and millions of users and huge engagements and UGCs and whatnot out in the ether there. It was about extending beyond 2 weeks in January. So our brand is really relevant for a very short period of the year. And that's where we have a lot of challenges with sponsors as well, because their sponsorships are often really, really relevant for a hyper-focused period of the year that they've regularly asked, how do we extend our partnership beyond 2 weeks in January? And I know Tian and Max and I were just talking about this earlier, that this is arguably one of the greatest opportunities that brands have in this space to extend their partnerships beyond the normal realm of what their partnership should be. It's literally 24/7, 365. And you can build a case very easily internally for why a brand should be included in an adventure or a game or a world. And for us, that was one of the measures of success, that we can then go back to our partners and say, hey, everybody, we've actually now created an environment that lives 24/7, 365. No, it's not just a website, or it's not the app, because even we know our website and app get millions and millions of hits in a very 2 to 3 week period over January. So this, for us, success was measured by the ability for us to extend beyond 2 weeks in January. And then the sort of 3 points that I talked about earlier are innovation, which is quite hard to measure, audience, and then revenue. We never really thought about the revenue aspect of what we're doing in anything Metaverse, NFT, Web3 related. It's more of a focus on innovation and audience. So how do we innovate to bring new audience to tennis, new audience to the AO, and ultimately down the track, if they come to tennis and come to the AO, we'll create the revenue as a result.
That's awesome. Actually, and before we jump over to you, Ridley, just if you could briefly mention, because I think it's worth noting, like the sponsors that you brought in and how that wove into the experience, because I think within the sort of sports universe, like that case study, that example is super relevant.
Yeah, so we thought that authenticity in the space was really important. So when a gamer is playing tennis on the court, they should look and feel like they're on an Australian Open court. So that has the Kia logo, which is kind of iconic across the back of the court. The Emirates logos in the back corner, Chubb, MasterCard, Infosys, Dunlop. I'm sure there's some that I'm probably forgetting as well, Marriott, Bonvoy. We wanted that to be as genuine as possible. So we pretty much brought all of our brands, other than alcohol partners, to the space. If the brands didn't want to be involved, we gave them the option to opt out of the environment. But then if they wanted to extend their partnership into AO Adventure further, we also gave them the opportunity to create hobbies or stores. So Emirates are a partner of the ballpark or a presenting partner of the ballpark, which is the kids area at the AO in real life. So we only thought it relevant to or appropriate to replicate that in AO Adventure as well. And then Ralph Lauren also have a store, obviously at the precinct. We then have a store inside AO Adventure also.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. Thanks, Max. Over to you.
Yeah, and I should have mentioned at the top that I'm actually from a sports background as well. So I had a not too dissimilar job to Ridley at Wimbledon when we did Wimble World. So I can kind of see it from both sides of the coin. But in terms of like how we measure success with Doppelgänger and some of the brands we work with, there's kind of three core areas that we look to track. First is how the experience is doing itself. Second is all about brand uplift. And then the third is, can we capture total media valuation generated by the experience? So on the experience performance, the first point, that's all about audience, where they're from, what the numbers are they coming back after a week? Are they coming back after a month? What are they doing in the space? Which areas are they going to? Which games are they playing? From a monetization point of view, what items are they buying? What items are popular? So really getting kind of into the weeds in terms of how that experience is performing. The brand lift piece is looking how people's perceptions of a brand have shifted, having been exposed to the experience. So if I've gone to the AO Adventure, having not been familiar with the brand, how does my perspective shift necessarily once I've got in there, and how does that compare to someone who hasn't been in? And we think that's really interesting when trying to kind of prove the value of these things internally at the organizations. And then the third is trying to justify Roblox as a valid way to deploy marketing spend. So can we capture total media valuation generated by the impressions caused both on platform on Roblox, but also off platform in the sense of organic content people are creating about AO Adventure on YouTube? How do we capture that value? People writing articles about it on ESPN or other kind of outlets, how do you capture that value? And then, coming up with a total valuation that you can then take back internally to kind of prove ROI essentially. Because I think in the last couple of years, there's been so much hype around the metaverse gaming space. And a lot of people came in to test and learn and experiment, which is totally valid. And also to get the big spiky PR headlines. Now, what we're finding a lot with our clients is when you've gone back to ask for more investment from your finance director, you need to kind of prove that this is a valid choice of media dollars. And so hopefully giving that kind of holistic sense of valuation is useful in having those discussions.
Yeah, it's interesting because as you were talking about it, I was thinking, oh, do they need to justify it if they've already done it? But to your point, like, oh no, in success, you want to keep going, you want to keep expanding and learning and growing and adapting, taking the learnings and being able to expand. So that makes a ton of sense. I think it's tricky though for organizations to even just get that initial buy-in, right? Like if you don't have those metrics, to be able to speak to. So I think like having conversations like this, Ridley, you've been awesome in sharing sort of your, data and learnings that you've had in your organization. I think that helps overall because it's just so early. So many organizations are just trying to figure out where, how it makes sense.
Yeah, and I actually think just to add to that point, I think something that Ridley touched on, sport is uniquely placed in that every rights holder tends to have sponsors attached to it. And if we're being honest, building a Roblox experience from scratch is a quite hefty investment. And when there's no precedent in terms of this definitely delivers X results, it can be difficult for an organization to swallow all of the time. But when you can go hand in hand with a partner, a sponsor, and say, we want to do this, we think there's value in it, do you want to kind of go hand in hand with us and help offset some of that initial investment costs? That's an opportunity for sports rights holders that most brands in other categories don't actually have. So I think that's a really great example for this group.
That's right, right. And so many sports organizations have those teams in place, right? With those relationships with sponsors to be able to sort of pull off something like this. To you, Tian, in terms of like challenges, I think Max has sort of talked about some challenges in terms of like sort of financing and, sort of getting that internal buy-in and just new ground overall. But what are the challenges that you see for sports brands to either enter the platform or be successful on the platform?
Yeah, I think that, of course, monetary finance budgeting is a blocker, but like we also have to understand like the fundamental difference of building on Roblox is so different than typing some characters on TikTok, on Twitter, or just taking a video with extreme AI photoshopping on TikTok. It's very, very hard to create like an immersive 3D even asset, let alone experience. So I think, I truly believe that we'll get there. Like the creation and development of 3D content is going to get easier and easier. But at this current moment, right, like what Roblox is like a very interesting conglomeration of social media, but also content, but also games, but also entertainment. This is like this new shared experience that's unlike anything else, but it is quickly growing with the biggest vote of confidence from Fortnite and Unreal, right? Also getting into this space. So I think the more that this rolls and grows, the easier it will be. But definitely, the friction of developing something is hard, especially for like sports entities when you're just so focused on becoming the champions or raising funds in order to become champions, right? And the second thing, which is even more fundamental, is like just understanding what Roblox is. There's like fundamental understanding of how Roblox and Fortnite are different, right? We are a platform. We don't build the experiences, how you have to work with developers or agencies, how you have to really care about your strategy, just like what Ridley talked about. What's your actual objective on Roblox? And if you lack that, then you can't be successful and your ROI is going to be non-existent and you're going to be disappointed. And so for me, it's really important that I also help anyone in the business, like try to clear the path for them, help them understand what we are, what we're not, and how do you get started, and pair them up with people like Max, right? So that they can really help them be successful.
Right. And if an organization doesn't understand Roblox, they're not gonna jump in. They have to understand it like as a starting point.
Right.
So Ridley, in terms of, like entering a space again for those organizations that are thinking about it or interested, what should sports organizations know ahead of time? And maybe Max, you can also take this one as well, since you've seen it again from both sides, from both Wimbledon and Doppelgänger. But, what advice would you have to those sports brands that, haven't yet jumped in, but they should know ahead of time?
I think Tian just almost answered this one in the end of what she was just saying then, that I think you really need to have an objective of what you're trying to achieve via the platform. And for anything in esports or gaming, whatever it happens to be, I think having an objective is really important, and not just jumping in because it's the newest, hottest thing, because that's a great way to use up a lot of resource and a lot of finance. And then if you don't have a strategy on where that potentially is in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, you're probably going to waste a lot of resource and money in doing something that may fail or may may not necessarily fail, but it may not be as successful as you'd hoped because you're possibly pinning that against something else. And then if you don't have the objective and the strategy of what that looks like in the future, I think it can be a dangerous game to play where you just jump in for the sake of jumping in.
Yeah, I'd add to that with an example being the AO and Wimbledon, you'd think would be two very similar organizations, both Grand Slam tennis tournaments. But the objective that Ridley touched on earlier, one of the objectives for the AO is how do we maintain relevance throughout the year when we're a 2-week tennis tournament? For Wimbledon, conversely, it was how do we make the biggest bang during the kind of 6-week period where we're relevant in the year? And so, we were fortunate to work with both of those organizations, but our approach back to them was very different because for AO, we've still got updates going out throughout the year when the tournament's not on. For Wimbledon, it was very much how do we just focus all of our energy, resource and marketing around this one singular moment. So to both of Tian and Ridley's points, once you know what your objectives are, once you know why you're in the space, then the what kind of falls out of that very easily. But don't start with the what without the why.
Yeah, I just want to extend on that a little bit as well, because we're sort of talking almost in the negative watch outs a little bit of where we've come from. But I think on the flip side, like brands should know that there is, and sports brands and teams and leagues and whoever's else is listening in today and wherever you're from, is that there is an enormous amount of opportunity here in this space right now. And I think there's an opportunity for you listening in, but also your brands or your teams to go on a journey of an exploration in technology. This is almost I look at it as though we're kind of at the early stages of where social media was 10, 15, 20 years ago. And we've got this opportunity now to extend our brands and our platforms onto a platform like Roblox. And I think that provides amazing opportunity for brands, but then for sponsors, for participation, for fans, for engagement, for broadcast. That you're really, like, creativity is limited by your imagination in this space. And I think that's really important that wherever you want to take the brand and the direction that goes, like, go wide. I think there's a great opportunity for brands to be really creative in this space as well.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for calling that out, Ridley, and certainly the opportunity. I mean, I think Tian, if you could speak to that a little bit more in terms of, right, like what are the benefits, what's so attractive about Roblox, its audience, its scale, et cetera, that would be relevant to sports brands?
Sure. Our audience currently is hard to reach youth audience, but we are quickly growing up to get that also very attractive young adult audience. Our 18 to 24 age category is our fastest growing one. However, of course, we understand our beginnings, which is, we were a gaming platform for the youth audience, but quickly we are growing up and we are becoming an all ages, all type content platform. But that current audience is extremely attractive to sports rights holders, because most of the sports rights holders I talk to, they are facing generally the same challenge. Nobody is trying to age up their audience. Everyone's trying to find the younger audience to expand their fan base, and they're all trying to go young. And, like what we're seeing is people spend on average 2.5 hours a day on Roblox. Whether that's a good use of their time or not, that's a different discussion, but that 2.5 hours is longer than TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. It's the most engaging platform in terms of time spent for the Gen Z and Gen Alpha. And that is just undeniable. That is, if you care about going where your fans are, going where your audience are, this is where the audience are, and that is absolutely a benefit. And we are also first of all, we are a completely community-driven platform. We are not driven by, hope to reach a certain stock price or whatever, right? Like everything we do is for the community. So but we also understand that this has to turn into some sort of ROI or increase in fan base. So we're definitely looking into, and especially partnering with people like Max to measure that brand lift, right? And we're getting started, but we're already seeing really positive results about just the control group versus people who has experienced your experience, what they do afterwards, how their search patterns look. Do they search for your brand or your particular content type? Are they visiting your websites? Are they going to your social media, right? So we are definitely paying attention to that. But in addition to that, we definitely want to work with the rights holders to see how are you seeing things on your end, right? Like, and at the end of the day, this is like a totally new way of measurement. You're measuring what people do inside immersive 3D experiences and how that lifts your brand outside, which is so different than just putting in a tracker or a cache inside some website, right? But this will, again, just like development and creation, ultimately grow and become more and more and more sophisticated.
Yeah, great. No, and I think that like there's a question sort of along that lines of like measurement and valuing. This was in the Q&A, and so this one, Max, I'll throw this over to you. So it's regarding your great insight. How did you calculate total media valuation generated by experience? Example, how did you approach putting a price to a social post a fan made about the experience?
Secret sauce. No. It's we benchmark against other cost per mille impressions. There's some jiggery pokery in the background that we can take you through more in depth on another call, perhaps. But yeah, benchmarking against kind of valuations of other digital media forms, transposing that against the numbers that we get on Roblox and coming up with a media valuation against that. I think there's a number of factors that we factor in, like the dwell time. So comparing something like an AO adventure, which Ridley touched on, might have had a 10-minute average engagement time per average user. That is incomparable to someone being exposed to an advert on Twitter or a pre-roll on YouTube, which would be 30 seconds. There's a real depth of engagement, which is from a time perspective, but also people have chosen to be in those experiences. There's no one can be forced into being in a Roblox experience. They've chosen to be in there, and then when they're in there, they're having an active experience. And so comparing that versus traditional media, which has been based on passive consumption, is something that we try to calculate in our calculations as well. And then there was another question: how do we calculate the?
So like, like a social post a fan made, and putting a price on that.
Yeah, so we use brand tracking software on a social sentiment tracking software, one called Brand24. I think their methodology is all based around per each post. It depends how many followers that person has, how much reach a particular post was able to achieve, and then again converting that into a monetary value based off of kind of advertising prices as benchmarks.
Cool. And then, so yeah, I'm seeing some questions here. We'll throw this over to sort of tackle this to the Q&A. So for those of you watching, if you have any questions, please go ahead and add them into the Q&A. There's this question around from Michael about sort of sponsorships, and does Roblox connect sponsors to teams wishing to have a presence on the platform, or is it typically like, the sports entities, teams that have the existing relationships? Maybe Tian, you could take that.
Sure, and then I will pass it on to Ridley.
Sure.
But the answer is no. We try not to get in the way of rights holders and their sponsorship partnership deals. You can either bring in your existing partners and create extensions to activate for them, or there are opportunities to attract completely new partners, but we leave it up to you.
Great.
Yeah, I can echo the same thing. So we basically created AO Adventure as another pillar of a partnership asset for our partners of the AO. There's obviously some limitations on who can be present in Roblox with regards to, I think, pretty much limited to no alcohol and gambling and a few others at the moment. But for the large majority of our sponsors, we were able to then go to them and say, hey, in line with your signage around the court or your flags in the precinct or your activation on site, we can now create environments within AO Adventure to elevate your existing partnership. So we were certainly presenting back to our partners about the opportunity that existed for them to come on board AO Adventure.
I will say that just like the pure creative sandbox of Roblox, one of the beauties is we're seeing a lot of fandoms and communities and brands find each other in ways that that isn't reflected in real life, right? So of course, AO and Emirates have an existing partnership, but who knows, right? Maybe there's like a K-pop band who really wants to tap into the AO audience and vice versa. Maybe AO really wants to get into the Korean market, right? So we're seeing a lot of that happen on Roblox, where you're cross-pollinating fandom and communities, and it's very, very successful.
That's so cool. Yeah, my daughter's really into K-pop. And so if there was a K-pop appearance in the AO Adventure, I'm sure she would check it out. In terms of just Tian, I think that I've noticed like the NFL had done some experience with Intuit. I think actually in the NHL, I think there was like an Upper Deck sponsorship as well. And so are you seeing just more brands, more sports brands, bringing in existing sponsorship partners?
That's right. Typically, I see anyone who has an existing, like a persistent experience. I see them being presented with their partners, which makes a lot of sense. It's a win-win for everyone. But then again, you don't have to create a persistent experience as the only way to enter Roblox, right? There's plenty of ways for you to come onto the platform without devoting like a team and resource into not only creating the experience, but also maintaining it, right? It takes a special type of strategy to do that. But, you can put items onto the platform. You can do something in another person's experience. You can put it inside your partner's experience. But yeah.
Great. We'll do a couple more questions and then we'll wrap things up. In terms of just like from Louise, what are some effective ways to introduce Roblox to companies and brands? So Roblox is relatively new for many brands in Brazil. Are there any key strategies or success stories that can help inspire their engagement with Roblox opportunities? Yeah, Tian, do you want to take that or anyone else?
Introduce Roblox to companies. I think the best way is just to go on and play it. That is quite probably the most effective thing. And what I found very anecdotal, of course, is anytime I talk to a rights holder or an athlete or a team, and someone on that team has kids or nephews or nieces that plays Roblox or is on Roblox, that is kind of like the best advertising and introduction that we can get, because just they are able to see with their own eyes just how engaged those people are. And just get onto the platform. But also I recommend you speak to Max, basically. He'll tell you everything about it, or me. Reach out to me.
Take on.
Max, there's this question about just like tangible data that can be presented to rights holders to make them more interested. Just like how you can convince them. And so I'm not sure if that's something that you get involved with even in that sort of pre kind of green light phase with brands. But yeah, how would you sort of like address that? If there's an entity out there and it's like, well, help us see the numbers, help us really understand what this ROI or potential ROI is.
Yeah, for sure. And I think Ridley's written a great article about the results from the AO, so you could definitely use that as a kind of public case study. There's a few things. There's definitely the kind of publicly available data that's that you can use to illustrate just the sheer reach of these experiences. But I think it's also worth making a case that I think the question tackles kind of more short-term monetization and short-term income. But I think the real value is in the long term. It's if you're a rights holder, then if you can make someone a fan of your event, they're going to be a fan for the rest of their lives. So if you're picking up people when they're 8, 9, 10 and getting interested in your brand at that time, then that's a long time period for them to be invested in your brand. And while it might not be necessarily instantly monetizable, having them as a lifelong brand fan is going to be hugely valuable in the long term. Which is probably not the answer you wanted. I mean, there's other kind of short-term metrics you can look at, like sponsorship sales, which again, there's case studies on, like in-game item sales as well. But I think you need to think about it in the short term, but also the long term. Yeah.
Cool. So last question, I'll just pose this to the sort of entire group. What has been the biggest lesson that you've learned about Roblox for sports brands in your time sort of working with the platform? So we'll go Ridley, Tian, and then Max.
I think this is a great question and it sort of rolls off the answer that Max was just giving to the previous questions there, that it's such an opportunity to extend brand partnerships. I think to the question that was there about the data, yes, there is data there. And then the last point, if we're being honest, to make the rights holders interested in either, we need to convince them of additional income or quantifiable data. I think if we're looking at it as a standalone sponsorship property, yes, absolutely. I think you need that data and reasoning and quantifiable information to support that, and possibly new revenue streams, etc. We certainly looked at this as simply another asset within a partnership framework. And those partnership frameworks around the AO consist of court signage, broadcast assets, on-site activations. It might be vehicle sponsorships where Kia have 140 vehicles driving around Melbourne, shuttling players back and forth to the precinct. There's an enormous amount of assets that are built into a partnership. This simply becomes another asset within that partnership. So when you go back to that partner to renew them next year or the year after, and you're wanting to charge them 5 or 10% more than you did last time, you can now say, we have 3, 4, 5 more assets in the partnership suite. And that's why the brand is now asking for more investment. I think that's how we need to think about the opportunity here, is that through the creative lens of innovation, we're opening up more opportunity for our brand to engage with more people globally, which inherently brings those people to our partners and sponsors as well.
Great. Tian, biggest lesson about sports brands on Roblox?
A lot of it actually just piggybacks off of what Ridley said, which I think is brilliant, and I totally agree. I see Roblox as just like pure opportunity and creativity. Of course, the immediate value is to use it as a way to attract fans and engage fans and really build your community instead of in a 2D format, but really get them immersed in what story you want to tell about your brand, which sticks with you so much more than just like scrolling through text. So I think that is this is what Roblox is giving you, a platform for you to do kind of like whatever you want and leverage our very robust economy, which really sets us apart because it's not like a frou-frou, like we're not really ready. The economy is here. We paid out like $650 million to developers last year, and over 180 billion avatar changes happened on our economy. So this is like here to stay. And it's up to brands and sports rights holders to decide just exactly how they want to use this platform in very, very creative ways. I think ultimately every brand will have a Roblox strategy in a few years, just like how they currently have like a social media strategy. And this is just another form of media. So yeah, I think, definitely watch this space. If you're not ready to dive in, you don't have to. You can dip your toe or just watch what other people do, but this is going to continue to evolve.
Great. Before we throw it to Max, I just want to, there was this question that came up. How much does building out an experience on Roblox typically cost? Does anybody want to take that?
I'd say how long's a piece of string is a phrase we have in England. I don't know if that translates in America, but it really does depend on the scope. I wouldn't want to commit to any numbers on the call.
Sure. And I can say from my perspective, having talked to a variety of different agencies, I mean, some are on the high end, like over $500,000, like plus the sky's the limit. On the lower end, I've seen sort of like in the sort of just under like $200,000, like in that sort of range. So I'd say like that's from my perspective and the conversations I've had, the ballpark of, of experiences. And again, there's lots of different agencies out there that have different capabilities, different track records, different pricing. So that's just from my perspective, but wanted to be able to share that. All right, Max, biggest lesson to close us out here.
Biggest lesson. I'll link it to that question from Kayla, but it's not a build it and they will come situation. So you can't just expect to build an amazing experience. While that's obviously incredibly important, you need to drive people there. You need to market it. You need to let people know about it. And you need to, ideally, if you have an objective like Ridley's, update it over the course of time so that it gives people a reason to keep coming back and back and back. But biggest lesson is it's really fun. It's a great space to be in. There's so much positivity around it. And yeah, it's super creative and very enjoyable space to work in.
Very cool. All right, thank you so much. Really appreciate our expert panelists for joining us from around the world, from Australia, from the UK, from New York. Really appreciate it. Such a great conversation. I think we've really scratched the surface. I think there's so much that is possible in terms of the opportunity and just for brands to really jump in. If the panelists could just share briefly, like, hey, if people want to learn more about your organization or get in touch with you, just the best way to do that. We'll go Tian, Ridley, and then Max.
Just find me on LinkedIn and just message me.
Cool.
Yeah, I think this is a really easy one. Between the three names here, there's not too many Max Proctors and Ridley Plumbers and Tian Pays on LinkedIn. So yeah, hunt us down on LinkedIn. We're always happy to have a chat. I think this is a space that we're all very passionate about as well. So I think talking about the opportunities that exist, the history of where we've kind of come from in a very short period of time, and how a lot of people want to know how we kind of found our way into this space. I think that's something that I kind of love talking about, the journey of how I came through sort of a more creative business development role into where I sit now. And yeah, please feel free to reach out.
Yeah, ditto what those guys said.
All right, Max, we're going to let you go to sleep.
Go to sleep.
Ridley, we'll let you start your day. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a good day, evening, wherever you are.